AGS allies and caregivers. You're listening to our new podcast, The Rare Advocates, a caregiver-worthy and rare disease podcast brought to you by Aicardi-Goutieres Syndrome Advocacy Association, where we update you with the latest news and conversations around AGS and rare diseases. Before we get started on today's episode, I would like to give a special thanks to ecamm Live, who gifted us this all-in-one live streaming and video production studio. With ecamm Live, video creation is easy, professional, and fully customizable. If you can think it, you can create it with ecamm Live. So thank you so much again for gifting us this. Also, don't forget to join the conversation. We are now on all social media platforms, so be sure to follow us, subscribe, wherever you prefer the best. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, you name it. So leave a comment and start a conversation with us. We're here to just make things a little bit easier for you. So now we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to introduce my next guest. In today's episode, we will have Patrick Winters, who will be sharing the story of their daughter, Aurelia, who was diagnosed with Aicardi-Goutieres Syndrome back in January 2019. We'll be talking about the diagnosis, treatment obstacles, and present state. So let me just bring on Patrick. Hi, Patrick. How are you doing?
Hi, it's late here, but I'm doing okay. Had a nice long day. Did a little bit of gardening, and I'm feeling ready to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, taking the time to let me and all the other listeners learn about your experiences and share your daughter's story. I think it's very important. So, please tell me a little bit about when you started suspecting that there was something wrong going on with Aurelia.
It's such a complicated question because the reality is I don't think that we ever really thought there was anything seriously wrong until she was about a year old. But in retrospect, we kind of looked back a little bit and we realized, she didn't start standing up until a little bit later than her brothers, because both of our boys, who are 9 and 7 now, and Ari's going to be 5 soon, they started walking at like 10 months, 11 months, and so when Ari was like about a year old, we started to wonder, is there something going on? Um, but she always hit the milestones like appropriately. She wasn't early for anything, but she was always kind of on time, or maybe like just at the tail end of when she was supposed to be doing something. Um, but when we thought that there was something wrong, I think we were a little bit in denial at first too, because you never imagined something as significant as this. But it was around Christmas time of 2018. We all kind of got sick, and we all had this nasty cold and didn't feel very well. And this is all 5 of us, the whole family. And I remember Christmas morning, like we were all just kind of exhausted and tired, and didn't sleep very well. Um, and over the subsequent few days, when the rest of us started to feel a little bit better, Ari just didn't really seem to bounce back. She just stayed so tired and worn out, and I don't remember if she still had any cold symptoms or anything, but she just kind of seemed off. And so we had a call to the pediatrician, who I think asked to bring her in. Um, and it was at that time that the pediatrician, just kind of took a look at her and said to my wife Natalie, that she's moving just a lot slower than the last time I saw her. Like something seems wrong, and I'm going to call neurology. I think she might have told us that she was going to call neurology and that she'd get back to us. And I'm sorry, I'm going to pause for 1 second and just dial back to November of 2018. I think Ari failed a lot of her gross motor assessment stuff, where they ask you, is the kid's a year old? Is the kid doing this? Is the kid doing that? And she had never had any signs. But I think she failed a couple of those. And so, the pediatrician was like, well, maybe she's just going to get to him late or something.
So, is that why you started seeing a neurologist at that point?
No,
Oh,
No,
I
see,
see.
that's the thing is even though that happened, nobody thought that anything was actually wrong, right? There was no sign of developmental regression or anything, just maybe that there was a slight delay. And so when we got sick at Christmas, and then when we were in front of the pediatrician in January, it was a little bit more of a like an escalation. Like maybe there is something wrong. Is what the pediatrician started to worry, right? She looked back at the notes, and you know, um, well, we went home, and I think I started looking at some like old videos and stuff from really just a couple of months ago. We had gone on a vacation in August, and Auri was crawling around the floor and sitting up and playing with stuff, and I kind of realized like she can't do that right now. She was still crawling on her knees, like hands and knees, and she would sit in like a what they call the W shape, on her knees, kind of. She could still do that. She could still sit up, but she couldn't really sit on her butt, and she couldn't really get in and out of that position. And especially with her, experiencing this like very weird, um, difficulty and stuff around this time, we started to get like extra nervous. And so the pediatrician called back and said, I spoke with neurology over at Duke University. The person on call really thinks that you should bring her to the emergency room. And my wife and I looked at each other like, the emergency room? What are you talking about? Like, she's fine. Like, she's crawling in bed with me. Um, but it was just this very confusing picture and puzzle to put together, and we ultimately decided that we would, but it was Sunday, and so we were going to wait until Monday because nothing happens on Sunday. Everybody's on just on call and whatever.
It's the
Yeah.
worst. Saturdays and Sundays.
So anyway, we went on Monday, early Monday morning. Natalie woke up, drove over there. It's like 30 minutes away. Went to the ER, and I showed up with, I had written down a list of like things that she couldn't do anymore, and that was when I had started to put the picture together. Like something is actually very wrong here, and I was worried about like muscular dystrophy, things that I had heard of before. And so I knew what tests they would run, and I was like, very anxiously like waiting for these results. Um, and I lose some of the story because it's like this really terrible memory, but uh, I think it was an MRI. The notes on the MRI were what really kind of gave us the first inkling that something was wrong. And actually, Natalie spent the night with Ari there, and I think what happened was a resident came in and sort of read the notes and noticed that the MRI report was in, and Natalie said, "Oh, what does it say?" And I think he made a mistake. He wasn't supposed to show her, but she saw or he read that it said something about suggestion of possible leukodystrophy, and uh, it's not a good feeling. But I was on my way to like meet them, and she told me that, and I still had like a 20-minute drive on the highway, and um, I'm like trying to drive, and I'm bawling tears, and um, it was just such a terrible moment. When I finally got there, they were taking her in for a lumbar puncture, and I think the nurses carried me basically down there because I couldn't see straight. I couldn't walk. I was a mess. Um, Lumbar puncture showed nothing. Um, no, ultimately nothing. We wanted to leave, and we got discharged. And uh, I might be oversharing some of this stuff, but I have like these really like these moments, when they were getting ready to discharge, and the people doing rounds, came over to say like, okay, do you understand like where you're going and what's happening? And yeah, I was like sitting outside the room while Natalie was inside the room, and I think I was like, yes, I understand that my daughter is probably dying, and that I'm going to go and make the best of it. Like that, I think I said that, and that's what I thought when I left the hospital. Um, so I think that was January 7th, I want to say, January 8th, something like that. But we're to return, right? Come back in a couple of days for a neurology appointment. And they ordered more tests. And when those tests didn't come back in a few days, they ordered more tests. And um, I was busy in the background at home, trying to read as much as I can. I think I probably contacted every doctor that is a part of the Global Leukodystrophy Initiative. I think I emailed all of them, asking questions because we didn't have a proper diagnosis, but we had the suggestion of leukodystrophy, and I had read that stem cell transplant was, potential option if done early for a number of them, and that was how I got in touch with Joanne Kurtzberg, who has been treating my daughter at Duke, and uh, maybe stepping forward, but I'll say that Dr. Kurtzberg was really the one that made things happen. So when I talk about like treatment and that struggle, she's really been the Auri's saving grace, and she suggested that we pay out of pocket to rush whole exome sequencing rather than waiting like 9 weeks or however long it was going to take for the leukodystrophy panel where they check for specific genes. She was like, if she's showing signs, if you're going to treat her and it's going to be a stem cell transplant, like we need to move really quickly, you should pay for this. So it cost us $9,000, and we paid to rush it. Um, and we're still doing additional blood tests. The neurologist is still doing an appointment every week, I think. And Ultimately, the genetic report came back. I think about 2 weeks later. I think it was January 24th. So 14 days, like 2, 3 weeks, basically, from the moment that we were in the hospital with an MRI to getting an actual diagnosis. Um, which was relatively fast. Families go through this really long extended period trying to figure this out, and people dropping the ball. And thankfully, we got to an expert, and we were really lucky. She's very forward thinking. She works quickly, and if not for Dr. Kurtzberg, this would have been a very different story. But we get this diagnosis, and the neurologist printed out some materials and said there was a clinical trial in Philadelphia, or there was.
Let me pause for a bit. When you finally heard the diagnosis, how did that make you feel? Because prior to that, building up to that, you said you were reading and trying to, get there as quickly as possible. But when the day came and you actually heard Aicardi-Goutieres syndrome, how did that make you feel?
They're hard questions, but I think about this all the time. This is always in my mind, and I'm here with you because I'm trying to, not be uh, uh, not be full of grief, but be full of motivation. So I've dealt with these feelings, and they're still there, but it's okay. It felt terrible. It felt absolutely terrible, because both with the diagnosis came a quick summary of the disease and what options there were. And basically, the description was that there was no treatment, and that uh, it was described to us as, or what I suppose what the doctor said is that in the literature, it's described as a disease that is sometimes a once and done kind of thing, like one period of regression, and when it's over, wherever you're left, that's you pick up from there, and you hope it's not horrifying, right? But then at the same time, you also read that it's horrifying. So how do you reconcile those two things? And I think I just cried. I just cried. And I think Natalie had Ari, and she was just like, "Okay, we're gonna figure something out. We'll get through this. Whatever we got to do." Um, the doctor said to Natalie, uh, she said something like, "You have such grace. Or you're such a woman of grace." And I laugh about it now because I was like, "Well, what about me? I have no grace. I'm just crying in the corner." But Natalie and I both had our roles to play, and I knew mine, and mine was to not accept, the story that I was told, and it was to go and read and research and figure out what I could. And so
So you just mentioned obviously that you and your wife are, very emotional, alternating with who's the strong one at the moment, I guess, when different doctors come in and tell you different things.
Yeah, definitely.
But you heard the words no treatment, right? So
Hmm.
that's obviously very shocking. But then you hear about, you said, recommendations to possibly go to Philadelphia. So tell me more about that. What led to that, and how'd you hear about CHOP?
Uh, there's a website, clinicaltrials.gov, um, and I think all of the clinical trials in Europe and the United States, they're all in this place. They're all registered there, and so you can look them up and you can search by disorder. And pretty much what our doctor handed us was a sheet of paper that was just a screenshot. Like she printed the web page where she had searched for AGS, and so there was something in Philadelphia, and so she handed me that paper, um, and that's really all I knew. She didn't know anything about it. There was no information published about it. Um, I don't think she dug very deep. She probably didn't have the time to dig very deep. They really don't have a lot of time to spend on these. I know that she tried, but there was some stuff in the literature in the background that she didn't present to me. So I contacted CHOP probably that evening. I know that she did as well in the background. And I enrolled Auri in their research project to collect blood samples, and I know the doctor tried to reach out to them to see if there was anything that we could do to treat her. What information could we get? And it was just a really, I'm going to say, knowing what I know now, it was a very awkward time. They were in Philadelphia, so they had they had had they had to stop this compassionate use trial because the medicine was approved like a couple of months before Ari was diagnosed. Um, so they were sort of between where they stopped the trial and where they were going to restart the trial. And so, there wasn't a lot of information. They couldn't, I doubt that they had done a lot of, deep a deep dive into what was going on with kids that had it. They were monitoring them, but they couldn't say to my doctor, "Yeah, take this medicine that we're studying and give it to her."
That time frame is very important.
Yeah.
You were diagnosed. You hear that there's possibly a trial going on. You want to enroll, contact CHOP immediately. But what happens between starting the treatment and trying to enroll? What's the timeline between that? What happens exactly?
Right. So she gets the diagnosis January 24th, I believe. Um, and I spend that week trying really hard to figure out if they're going to be starting a new clinical trial, if she can be enrolled in sort of the next phase. And we heard they'll be doing it soon. They'll be doing it soon. Our doctor, I think, heard the same, but they couldn't really say much about what our options were. So it became clear, I think, about after a week that there was going to be no trial that Ari could enroll in, and so that we were going to have to try and do something here. And um, our neurologist here, I think, was open to it, but this is a medicine that she knew nothing about. It's a medicine that there was no information to guide her. Um, it could be thought of as a dangerous medicine for a child, which it is. Um, and so she tried. Uh, she also talked with the pediatric rheumatology department there, trying to see if they would get on board. And really, I don't think that anybody here felt comfortable. And so I kind of kept trying and couldn't really make any headway. And I remember having a call with the doctor. So maybe like 2 weeks after the 24th. So I don't know, February 7th or something like that, where she said, I'm sorry, but we just can't do this. Like, we can't get anybody to do it. So, you know, you go from like diagnosis to the possibility of a treatment and being desperate, but then the treatment's inaccessible. And I hung up the phone with her, and I just kind of like hung my head. I was at the office, and I think that same day I met a friend for lunch in a park, and he was trying to be uplifting. kind of console me a little bit. And he just said something like, you gotta have faith or keep hope. And for whatever reason, because of the kind of person that I am, that made me angry. So
It would make me angry
um,
too because you want to get somewhere and it seems like you keeps going lower and lower and lower.
I had so many metaphors. I wrote a lot at that time. I had kept a blog, and I just wrote so much. I had all of these metaphors, but the one that I kept coming back to was like I was in this dark hallway, like trying to find an exit, and all the doors were locked. And I kept getting deeper into the darker hallway, and the doors kept closing on me. So there was no exit. I had no way to get out. I had no way to get Ari out. Um, and uh, I don't know, that conversation in the park kinda lit a fire under my ass, and, I went home that day, and that was when I started, uh, trying to escalate as much as I could. And of course, you can't do this in person. It's not like you have an appointment that you can, like, walk in and, like, yell at everybody or anything like that, but I did it via email, and I tried really hard to, not be overly emotional, but to present the evidence that I could find, the information that I knew, the consequences of not doing anything, and contacted the chair of pediatrics, the all the people in the rheumatology department, the neurologist, um, and ultimately it was Dr. Kurzberg. I hadn't spoken to her in a couple of weeks because once we had that AGS diagnosis, bone marrow transplant, which is her specialty, wasn't an option. But I reached back out to her and I said, "Listen, I think that we're having sort of a logistical problem here. I think that this is something that can help my daughter, and it's just a matter of confidence or knowledge or resources or something. Can you help us?" And I talked to her the next day, or maybe it was an email, but basically she got things moving, and ultimately she prescribed. And kind of within a handful of days, we were at Duke again with her, doing lots of screening, blood tests. We made it happen. We made it happen in a couple of days. So anyway, so January 7th is when we were in the hospital. The MRI says leukodystrophy. January 24th, we have a diagnosis, genetic diagnosis, because we rushed genetic testing. And I think it was February 15th was the first day that we gave Ari the pill. Throughout this whole period, she continued losing skills. And I think even after we had a diagnosis, she was still crawling around my sister-in-law's house. Grandparents came to visit because they, heard how horrible this was. And um, but I think the 27th or something is the last day that she crawled. Um, it's like she was in this decline that just kept steadily happening. And somewhere before we started the treatment, she had started choking on water. And so that was a really freaky thing because she couldn't drink anymore. Um, Fortunately, she was still able to nurse. So Natalie kept breastfeeding her for like another year or two to just kind of keep her going. The day after she started baricitinib, she got happy, and remember she was just on her belly on the floor, like lifting her head up. She's not really doing a push up, but it just like it switched the next day, and every day after she started that pill, she was going up. Right. And so we watched her crashing and crashing and crashing with like total desperation. And admittedly, we kind of threw a Hail Mary to get her this medicine because we had absolutely no idea if it was going to help. But every day after that medicine, she went back up. And she's been on it now for, I think, like 4 years.
So, for those of you who are listening to us, you can't see our faces right now, but this is a very hard conversation to have um, because we have all had similar situations. And seeing your child smile again, I mean, I just heard it in your voice, and no words can
Yeah.
describe that feeling because you just want them back and you want to hold on to them. And I heard it in your voice, and it just, unfortunately, it's bringing flashbacks. And without that
Mhm.
treatment, I would be feeling completely different today. And I think that's exactly what we're hearing from you today. From the beginning of the story to now after the treatment, it's a completely different voice, Patrick, and we can feel it. So, you told us, many doctors, the months, the timeline, and all the thoughts that you put with the medicine part, getting the treatment. But how much is it, or how did you actually acquire it? Did you have insurance help you?
I'll talk about how we got it paid for, but I kind of want to mention that that like getting your child's smile back, right? Like the week or so before she started that medicine, like she was still crashing, right, and not sleeping at night. And there were like 3 nights in a row where she was just screaming all night and waking up multiple times a night. We were pulling our hair out. So when we started that medicine, oh my God, it just like she slept through the night and like everything just got better. Um, and families deal with that for months. This was like this was just a handful of weeks for us. I cannot imagine dealing with this for such a long period of time. So we were very lucky. Um, the doctor that prescribed the medicine has resources, and we didn't delay. Uh, we were ready to pay for it ourselves if we had to. She used a grant that she had for helping kids, that couldn't afford medicine to pay for it. So she paid the first month for us. Um, so there was no delay, right? We didn't ask how much it cost. We didn't care. We were going to do everything. Um, and um, we got it. I saw the bill. I kind of, I kind of went into sticker shock a little bit. It showed up, and I think the bill was for like $8,000 or something like that for a month's worth. Um, and I freaked a little bit. I remember like calling my dad, and I'm like, can you can you or the family, can anybody finance this? Like how could we possibly pay for this? I really panicked, because I also knew that uh, that nobody was getting this medicine paid for by insurance companies, right? And as it turns out, I'm fairly certain that my family was first, the first to get the first with AGS to get private insurance to pay for this. I was a little bit, I felt a little bit better because I had talked with Dr. Rafaela Golbach-Mansky. She is at the NIH Children's National. The sort of trial that kind of started this AGS thing with baricitinib. She had been the doctor that did that and started that. And she told me that some families were able to get insurance approval. These were kids with other disorders. So I felt a little bit better. But of course, it got denied. um, and we had 1 month to get it covered. Otherwise I was going to have to start paying for it. So it got denied. Um, and our doctor was like, "Oh, don't worry, they always deny this. We'll appeal. We'll talk to them." Um, got denied a second time, um, and I think 3 weeks at this point had gone by, something like that, because it's kind of like there's like or even longer before you get the denial. So it takes time. They send you a letter, and um, so it's slow. And after the second denial, though, our doctor wrote me an email, and she said, "I think it might help for you to write a letter." And uh, that was all I needed to hear. You know, I was like, "Okay, this I can do." Right? Um, so I actually didn't write it about Ari at all. I wrote it about. It was almost like I did a research project. I just like took all of the research, the background on the disease, the other studies with the single patient studies with JAK inhibitors. I put it all together, and I produced this narrative that basically was, you know, this medicine is working for kids. We're seeing it. There are stories about it working. The evidence, the theory is there. It's been talked about, 10 years ago in the literature that this is a potential treatment. Um, and I kind of ended it with, this is a rare disease. Like, what's going to happen if you don't pay for this? She's going to cost you millions of dollars, right? That was kind of the angle that I put at the end was, we have to take this differently because this is a rare disorder. The consequences of not treating it are profound, and the cost of not treating it is even higher. So it's going to cost you more if you don't pay for this medicine. And what I did was I printed the whole thing with all of the references. So I had a stack of like 100 pages of paper, and I put it in a big manila envelope and I mailed it to the insurance company's headquarters. But ultimately, it got approved. So we did not have to pay for it out of pocket the second month. And since then, it's been covered, thankfully.
So getting approval, finally getting that phone call, because I'm assuming the phone call was before the letter. How did that make you feel? What was the feeling that you had when you got the approval call?
I would like to say it made me feel better, but we we were not we still didn't know if this medicine was going to work. I still didn't know what was going to happen to my daughter, right? She just got this diagnosis. She's like pretty significantly disabled at this point, and this is all brand new to me. I kind of have a sense that it can get worse. That an illness or colds can make it worse. So I didn't think about it at all. It was this is just I still have all of this on my plate at this point. There were just so many things that I couldn't. It's not like I could sit back and like feel relief. Um, there was not much information out there about this disease. Taking every day at a time, and hoping that things were going to get better, and that I was going to see, my girl get stronger and regain skills, and she has much more slowly than I would have hoped. Um, but that's what happens when you suffer brain damage. So, this medicine was great. I was happy we got it. I was happy the insurance stuff got out of the way, but it was also only approved for 6 months, right? So I knew that this was like a battle that we were going to have to revisit. Um, and I thought that would be more complicated. But I don't know. I was just focused on what's next. What do I do next? How do I help her now? What's the next thing I can do?
So how long has she been taking the JAK inhibitors at this point?
So probably like 3 years and 8 months or something like that. I see those copays and the bills, and I deal with that. There's been so many hiccups with the pharmacy and requesting more information, and having to reauthorize, and like all of this has just been in the background for me because my focus has been on keeping my daughter healthy. Man, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, this is just stuff for me that is just the background of my life. It's like this extra weight and this extra burden and concern, but it's also not the most important thing. Right? I have to spend so much time and energy and effort dealing with this stuff when I should be spending more time and more effort, being with my kids and being present with my family. And
So as a medical parent, you're mentioning obviously the phone calls with insurance, the phone calls with the pharmacies, making the appointments, attending the appointments, doing your homework after the appointments, the
yeah,
studies, the labs and so forth, and obviously in between all that, the therapy, and then wanting to have some kind of normalcy around your house. So what's your one wish, and I say wish because, I say that lightly because we have many wishes and we obviously wish our child was healthy, but our children are not healthy. So what's the one thing that would make things better for you and you wish, you would hope that, it's feasible and you hope it would get done?
I think if I had the financial resources to not have to worry about any of this stuff, that would make my life much better. Um, I don't want to have to think about the cost of this medicine. And for the last handful of years, I've been far too afraid to consider new opportunities or positions. I've been dealing with a tremendous amount of stress that makes it difficult for me to take on more responsibility at work. But then, you know, it's just had this effect that if I'm being honest, I'm sure that I've had a lot of lost income because I've just not been able to be a professional. I've had to be a dad, an advocate, and um, I really wish that I just had the financial resources to not have to worry about insurance and not have to worry about paying for my daughter's medicine. That I could focus on what I want to be doing. Yeah, I think it's that simple. I can't change the other things. I can't solve Ari's disease. I can't change the fact that she's disabled. I can't change any of that, and I'm at peace with that. But I I really wish it wasn't so scary or so complicated to be able to pay for the types of therapy that'll help her gain as much independence as possible, or for the medicine that basically saved her life and saved her future. Um, I wish that I just had the resources.
Yes, and I really hope we can collectively get that message out there that we don't have control over a lot of things, but the few things that we can make a difference, we will spend the time that we have trying to make that difference. And getting affordable treatment is huge, and not only affordable, but reachable for everybody that needs it. And for those who are listening to us, we don't want to end on such a note. So, Patrick, can you please share with us any final thoughts or perhaps advice that you could give to those who are listening? It could be parents that are going through something very similar, a rare disease, or those who are newly diagnosed. What kind of words of wisdom can you give them as we're wrapping up this podcast?
Don't give up, right? There were a lot of times where it would have been very easy for me to just like sit down and just accept that whatever was happening was what was going to happen, or that this mountain couldn't be climbed, or that this problem couldn't be solved, or that this medicine is inaccessible to her. There were a lot of times where I wanted to give up, um, but and I know it's hard. It was very hard to not give up, but uh, but you got to keep going because you don't know. That metaphor I used about the doors closing and this long dark hallway. Um, Somebody cracked the door open because I kept walking. Right. Um, uh, I really think that Ari is in as good of a condition as she can be, and I think it's because we we just kept going. Don't give up, keep going, keep looking for new options, and they may be years down the line, and that might be the case even for AGS and future treatments. We look at baricitinib as being so important, so helpful for us, but we know that we need to find other things too, right? So I'm still moving on to the next thing. I want to be able to move on from this. I want this problem of access and cost to be solved. I want everyone to be able to access this medicine because it's the best option that we have right now. And I want us to be able to move on and focus on the next thing and not be trying to solve this problem.
Patrick, I'm at a loss of words with this whole entire podcast and hearing your story. It is, unfortunately, like I said before, giving me flashbacks. But now I want to think about the future. And if Ari or your other kids were to watch this podcast, or your wife were to listen to this podcast, what do you want to tell them? Because they're also very, very important people in your life. Can you share with us your final thoughts, but this time towards your family?
Yeah, I think this is a really easy one for me. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of all of them. Um, this is not this disease or this disorder has affected my entire family. My kids were all relatively young. Ari was a year old. Lennox was 3, and Max was 5. So these are young kids that are, living in a home uh, with parents that are having panic attacks and falling apart, with a sister that something is happening to her that they can't understand. Um, Natalie did and does have a lot of grace. There's still a lot of yelling and a lot of fighting in our house because we are still extremely stressed. But I am proud of us collectively as a family for caring for each other, supporting each other, um, and and it's not just about all of us supporting Ari. Um, she's the sweetest. She's able to speak pretty well now, and she, like if I look really tired or I had a bad day or something like that, she'll be like, "Are you okay, Dad?" Like she's just like she's very supportive of us as well. Um, and so I'm proud that we all care for each other and that we have held together as a family, because this has been and will continue to be a very challenging parenting experience and a very challenging sibling experience. And we ask a lot of Ari, and she's got to do so much therapy and work, and she gets blood draws and IVs, and it's just so hard on everybody. But I'm proud of everyone for supporting each other and being. Uh, well, I said I'm proud of them. We are a family that I am proud of.
Thank you so, so much for sharing your story with us tonight. I am happy that the listeners got to know you a little bit better, got to know your family, your your experiences, so that they can be encouraged to keep on going and not give up. This is again a treatment, not a cure. You have a long way to go, but I'm really thankful that you took time out of your busy schedule to talk to us and share everything with us. And for those who are listening to our podcast or watching our podcast, please join the conversation. Leave any comments for Patrick. He will reply to those comments. Or, Patrick, can they reach out to you through Instagram?
Yeah. So I am rare_Dadvocate on Instagram. And yeah, you can reach out to me. And actually, I have a page for Auri, astounding Aurelia. You can reach out to me. I promise to reply with memes.
Yes, and we'll leave Patrick's information down in the first comment in the description box. So, one more time, thank you so, so much. I appreciate you for being here, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ben.